I call Don't Die With Your Music Still In You. And who better to quote than Thoreau right here in Concord when he talked about some of us hear a different drummer and we must march to the music that we hear. But all of you, everybody watching, everybody here in this beautiful parish, all of you have some music playing. And all of you have a heroic mission. There's no accidents in this universe. We all show up here with a purpose. There's an intelligence that is a part of everything and everyone, and all of us are connected to it. And too many of us are afraid to listen to that music and march to it. You out there, I know you have a book you wanted to write. I know there's a composition you wanted to compose. I know there's a song you want to sing someplace. Maybe you want to raise horses out in Montana. Or maybe you want to open up an ice cream shop on Cape Cod. Who knows what it may be. Maybe you just want to travel and see the world. Maybe you want to go into a relationship with someone but you've been afraid to, but your heart says it's the right thing to do. All of us feel something. And in Leo Tolstoy's famous novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, he asks this question that would be terrifying to me. He says, as he has his accountant from Moscow lying on his deathbed, contemplating the horror of this question, what if my whole life has been wrong? I've known what my music is. It's playing right now. As I stand here in front of you with these cameras and in this place, and as I sit down and write my books and tell the world what I know are my truths, I feel always completely on purpose and fulfilled. And no time will I ever come to the end of my life and say, what if my whole life has been wrong? Whoever you are, whatever that music is, however distant it may sound, however strange, however weird others may interpret it to be, don't get to the end of your life and know that you're going to leave and not have it played yet. Don't die with your music still in you. It's the message of the greatest teachers who've ever walked among us. It's the message I give to you today as one of the principles for success and peace in your life. The next principle I call embracing silence. And embracing silence is not that I say this to you because it's so important to be quiet. What I have learned, I have a dear friend, and many of you know, we've put out tapes together, we've appeared on stages all over the world together. He's like a brother to me. His name is Dr. Deepak Chopra, a medical doctor, and a dear and close friend. And whenever anything is going on in my family, if I'm having a problem with one of my children or in my own life, and if I call him up and I'll say, Deepak, or his wife Rita, I'll say, Deepak, what do you think I should do? He always has the same answer. Meditate. I'll say, yes, Deepak, I understand meditate, but I said, what do you think? He said, Wayne, go deep inside and meditate. Always meditate. I'll say, will you put Rita on? Wayne, meditate. I say, all right. And you know, I've learned a lot in meditation. But what I know most about getting quiet and getting peaceful is this, that there's only one power in the universe, and it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it soul, spirit, consciousness, God. You can call it Louise. You can call it anything that you want. But as Alan Watts said, you can't get wet from the word water. It's not what we call something that gives it its substance. And this one power, this one force that flows through everything and allows everything to be, is indivisible. You can't cut it in half. You can't divide it. It's one. It's knowing the one. And everything in your life is almost always given a division. Male, female, young, old, tall, short, black, white, good, bad, up, down. These are all dichotomies. These are all these splits that we all have in our lives. The whole physical world that we live in and are immersed in, it's always immersed in this division. I used to teach course at St. John's University in New York, and I used to tell my students when I was trying to teach this principle, anybody who can come to class and bring with them a magnet that only has a North Pole, I'll give you an A in the course. You don't ever have to attend another class. And no matter how thin they would slice that magnet, there was always the South Pole, because the physical world is made up of dichotomies. But we have to learn to fuse the dichotomies. And in fusing the dichotomies and blending the one, that's what silence does for us. That's why embracing silence is so powerful. Because no matter how many times you cut silence in half, it's like zero. You still only get silence. In Zen, they say it's the space between the bars that holds the tiger. And it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. These words that are coming out of my mouth right now come out of the silence. And finding that silence and embracing it means that you go to the place within you that you cannot divide. Just like you can't divide the source, the one, the spirit. You can't divide that either. It's only one. So when you go into your silence and you begin to practice meditation and you begin to make this a part of your life and embrace silence, what you discover is this is where you'll come to know your source. You'll make conscious contact with your source. I can't tell you how many people that have come to me who have suffered from serious illnesses, who've been given diagnoses that it's terminal and that you can't do it, who have gone out to the wilderness and have decided that I am going to commune with nature. And the transcendentalists, Thoreau and Emerson, they believed that nature was our source and that we were all products of nature. And if you can get back to your source, if you can get back to that feeling of being with spirit, that's where healing can take place. And I've had wonderful stories of people who've told me that it was when I began to embrace that silence that I began to feel more connected to my source. Embrace silence because it's a way to come to know God, to know your source. Both are indivisible. And the only experience you can have in your daily life that even comes close to a spiritual awakening is silence. The next principle I call giving up your personal history. And I learned it from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who once said that one day, he said, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history. And just like drinking, he said, I gave it up. And that, and only that, has made all the difference in the world. You know the nice thing about giving up your personal history? Is that if you don't have a story, you don't have to live up to it. All of us have these bags of manure that we carry around with us, called our past. And the people who have done things to us, and the events and the circumstances, all of this stuff that we use and we bond to. And we bond ourselves to these wounds of our past, and we identify ourselves on the basis of these wounds. And every once in a while we set it down and we reach in there and we smear it all over ourselves. And then we wonder, why does my life smell so bad? I don't understand this. When in fact, the now, this moment, merging yourself into the now, means that you may have been in a relationship. I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children. And she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it. And she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, you've got to say something to me. You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this. And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, this hat. And this is your past. Now, you can't just set set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it, as I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today, and the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it, and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go, and neither does the wake of your life the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now. The next principle I call, it's from a line of Albert Einstein. He said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. In order to work at solving these things called problems in your life, you have to change your mind. It is your mind where they live. It is your mind that created them. There is where you experience them. They're all illusions. You must change your mind. Literally rewrite your agreement with reality. One of the things I had said earlier is that one of the most difficult things to do in the world is to admit that you were wrong. Admitting that you were wrong is nothing more than saying, I have been making choices with my mind that have created things in my life that are not working. And I no longer intend to continue making those choices. I was wrong. You don't have to make a declaration of it. You don't have to go out and feel guilty about it. You just simply say, it didn't work. The relationship that I was in before, I behaved in these ways. I didn't realize that it wasn't working for me. Now I do, and this is where I choose to be now. The secret of a successful relationship is, to me, understanding that you put your attention and your energy in a person on what you love rather than what you don't love. Robert Frost said it so beautifully. We love the things we love for what they are. For what they are. Not for what they ought to be, not for what they used to be, but for what they are. So when you look into the eyes of a person you're in a relationship with, whether it's your children, you catch them doing things right as much as you possibly can. That's oftentimes takes a lot of hunting, but you'll find it. And when you think that my relationship isn't working, remember, it's in my mind. What am I thinking about that person? And if I could just change my mind and put my thoughts on what I love about this person and keep them there, that makes the relationship flourish. And there are people who go through their entire relationship history with no anger, no hatred, no bitterness, and only love. The next principle is, I call it treating yourself as if you already were what you would like to become. In other words, you get out in front of your life and you see yourself as having already what you know you'd like to have and deserve to have. My children know how to do this perfectly. I have a daughter who wanted a prom dress, and the prom dress was way outside the budget that I thought a prom dress should be. I thought a prom dress shouldn't cost over $20, so I do have a problem, right? But I upped it to somewhere around $250. I don't know how much, whatever. To me, it was still more than I paid for my first house, okay? But anyway, she called and said, Dad, this is the only prom dress I could wear. I've got to wear this prom dress. If I don't wear this prom dress, it's just on and on and on with this wonderful. You know, I saw a wonderful book about how to raise teenage daughters. The title of it is Get Out of My Life, but first drive me and Cheryl to the mall, all right? That's the actual title. It's a good book. And so I told Serena, I said, it's just beyond the budget. I've got a certain amount of money that I'm willing to put for it. And she said, but I've already seen myself wearing it. I've already tried it on. I have a picture of myself in the dress in my living room, and I've already showed it to the guy who was taking me to the prom. I mean, it was this whole thing about, and she already saw herself in it. I said, well, if you see yourself in it, then you're going to have to also see yourself as earning the difference between what I'm willing to pay. And she drew up a contract. She went onto the computer, and on the background of the computer, you know where they have these little background things they put on? There was 500 pictures of the dress, all right? And she signed a contract and said, I'll babysit, I'll do this, I'll do that, and I will pay the difference. And she did, and she wore the dress. Because she understood that you treat yourself as if you already are what you'd like to become. There's a genius in you. You have to treat yourself as if you already were that genius. There's something you're completely capable of. See yourself as already there. Then you'll act upon those thoughts, because the ancestor to every action, said Emerson, is a thought. The next principle is called treasuring your divinity. Treasuring your divinity. There's a wonderful observation that I saw from Emerson in Self-Reliance. It's about trusting your divinity, knowing that you are connected to your source, knowing that you are a divine creation and that there are no accidents. He said, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his own thought, because it's his own. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. We often reject our thoughts, and we see the things that we think of as grand and as genius, and we reject them because they're our own. Treasuring our divinity instead of being terrified of it. Knowing that I am always connected to my source. There is no way that I cannot, because it is in you, and I am in you, and you are in me, and you can never be separated from it. There is no place that this source is not. It grows everybody's fingernails. It beats everybody's hearts. It digests everybody's foods. It opens all the flowers, and you're always connected to it. And finally, the last principle I call wisdom is avoiding all thoughts which weaken you. You know, every thought has an energy, just like everything else in the universe. And if you have a thought of shame, it will weaken your muscles. And what is your heart but a muscle? If you raise a child who believe in shame and feel ashamed of themselves, every time they think that shameful thought, they will be weakened. And if you have a thought of fear, and if you have a thought of stress, and you have a thought of anguish and anxiety, all of these thoughts and many more are the thoughts that will always weaken you. When you are having a thought that you know is disempowering you, shift it. Shift it to one that is empowering rather than disempowering. And the thoughts that empower are thoughts of neutrality and willingness and love, and ultimately thoughts of divinity. And when you see a troubled person who is out there struggling at the highest level of unity consciousness or God consciousness or spiritual consciousness, you recognize yourself in all that you see. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I am connected to that person. Changing your thoughts. I appeared on the Tonight Show many years ago, several times, quite a few times. And I remember coming home from the Tonight Show, and I was walking along the beach, and they had taped the show the night before, and I was out for a walk, and a woman who lived in the Northeast stopped me, and she said, "Didn't I see you last night on that? How could you be here?" I said, "Well, I flew the red eye, and I was walking along." And she said, "You know, we're moving down here." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like?" And I said to her, I said, "Well, what are they like where you live?" She said, "Well," she said, I live in a very big city." And she said, "They're very pushy. And people are not very kind. And they don't have time for you." And she said, "It's really not very pleasant." She said, "That's one of the reasons I'm leaving there." I said, "Well, that's pretty much what you're going to find here." That's basically what the people are like here. On the way back on the same day, someone else who had seen me the night before on The Tonight Show, who had lived in the Midwest, stopped me and asked me almost the same question. She said, "You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my husband and I are moving here and we're looking for a school." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like here?" I said, "What are they like in Chicago where you live?" She said, "It's the Midwest." She said, "People are very friendly, they're open, they open their homes to you, they're very loving, they're very kind." She said, "It's a wonderful place." She said, "I love that, I'm going to really miss that." I said, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here. It's what you expect, it's what you think about that expands. It's what Emerson taught us. The ancestor to every action is a thought. Change your thoughts, and you change your world. Change your expectations, and you change around what you begin to manifest and see showing up in your life. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Coming up next, a special bonus segment. Dr. Dyer shares more teachings and stories about success and inner peace.
I'm walking on the very grounds that Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau actually walked on in their lifetime. And one of the most important things that Emerson said to all of us is that the whole course of things is to teach us faith. And teaching us faith isn't really about teaching us religion as much as it's teaching us faith in ourselves. A belief that we are connected to something that is greater and grander than all of us, and that which we are connected to is divine, that we are all divine beings, and that each and every one of us ought to really consider very strongly treating ourselves that way at all times in our lives, recognizing the importance of our own thoughts, reminding ourselves that what we think about is what expands into our lives, and that our thoughts are the most powerful force that we have. They're our connection to eternity, so that each and every one of us should be remembering what Emerson and Thoreau and Louisa May Alcott and so many of those people who lived right here wrote about and talked about and encouraged us to form a transcendent view of ourselves and of our world. One of my very favorite words that was invented by a man who was a great teacher of mine, his name was Carl Jung. He called it synchronicity. And it's a term that reflects sort of a place where you can get to in your life where you can have a collaboration with fate almost, where you can begin to see things showing up into your life just because you were thinking them. And for some of us who are very practical-minded, we think, well, that's absolutely impossible. All of these things are just coincidences. But the word coincidence is an interesting word. In mathematics, coincidence refers to angles that coincide. And in mathematics, two angles that coincide are said to be two angles that fit together perfectly. And we have taken a term that means things that fit together perfectly and assume that somehow it's all done accidentally. But in a universe in which there is an intelligence guiding everything, there are no accidents. One of my favorite ways of describing this, I did with a friend of mine years ago on some tapes. His name was Deepak Chopra. And Deepak and I were in front of an audience in London. And we all of a sudden started dialoguing about how to get strawberry ice cream. And we came up with there are 4 ways to get strawberry ice cream. And they raised in level and consciousness from the lowest to the highest. So the first way of getting strawberry ice cream is to have a thought. Everything always starts with our thoughts. And the thought is, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream. And then you act upon that thought. You get up, you get on your bicycle, you get into your car, you go for a walk, you go to the store, you purchase your strawberry ice cream, and you come home and you say, I've got strawberry ice cream. And we don't think that that's too amazing. But if you really look at it, it is very amazing. because that thought is invisible, it's formless, it's internal someplace. We know there's a command center in our brain, but we've never seen the commander that's in there who says, I think I'd like to have some strawberry ice cream. So it's a pretty amazing process. Have a thought and then act upon it. The second way to get strawberry ice cream is to have a thought, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream, and you stay right where you are, and you send one of your children off to get the strawberry ice cream. And this is a higher level of consciousness, because here you are just sitting there having a thought, and you just express a word, and someone else goes off, gets the strawberry ice cream, brings it back to you, and you think, this isn't too bad a way of doing it. The third way we talked about on stage was the more intriguing way. And the third way to get strawberry ice cream is to have a thought, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream. And then someone walks by, and they say to you, excuse me, is this your strawberry ice cream? And when that happens, you go, whoa, booga, booga, booga. And you call everybody that you know, and you tell them, you can't believe what happened today. I was just thinking about having some strawberry ice cream, and a stranger just walked by, and there it was, and he handed it to me. This is what Jung called synchronicity. And this idea that you have a thought. Perhaps it's a thought about a sister that you haven't talked to in 5 years, and she lives on the other side of the country, and you can't get her out of your mind. And that thought represents an energy. And that energy says, gee, I'd really like to talk to my sister, but I haven't talked to her in a long time. And all of a sudden the telephone rings, and there's a feeling in here. And that feeling says, gee, I bet you that's my sister. And you pick it up, and sure enough, that's her. That's her calling you. And you everybody that's out there has these kinds of experiences. You have a thought about something. I can remember one time having a thought about getting my screen doors fixed. And I had been given a hard time at home about get your screen doors fixed. And I just hate fixing screen doors. And I was driving down the freeway, and I looked to my left, and passing me was a truck that said, we will fix your screen doors. And I thought, this is synchronicity in work. And I followed that truck, and I got his number, and I called him, and I had the screen doors fixed before I even got home that evening through a telephone call. And we often think these kinds of things that we call synchronicity, or we call sort of a serendipity or collaboration with fate, that they're accidental. But there's no accidents in this universe. Every thought that you have is a thought that is an energy. And that energy, when it is sent out, connects to something else. And everything in this universe is connected. Every tree that you see in this scene right here, every single bug that's out there, all of the thoughts that you have, all of the human beings. There's a philosophy that says that a butterfly flows his wings in New York, that it affects the winds in Tokyo, all around the world. So that's synchronicity. But there's a fourth way of getting strawberry ice cream, and that's the way that I dream about and think about. It's called unity consciousness. And this is where you have a thought, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream. And you manifest it. In the scriptures, this is called the gift of fish and loaves, that you live at such a high level of consciousness that whatever it is you place your attention on shows up, and you become the creator or the co-creator of your life. But those are the four ways of getting strawberry ice cream. The first is quite easy. You have a thought, and you go out and get it. The second is you have a thought, and someone else does it for you. That third one, called synchronicity, that's one in which you can begin to see that when you have a thought, you have the power to attract into your life what you're thinking about, even though you may not be consciously aware of it. You can literally negotiate the presence of what you place your attention on. And ultimately, even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. And this means that we all have that capacity to have the gift of fish and loaves in our lives, or to manifest what we would like. Basically, there are 3 levels of consciousness that I like to speak about. They go from low to high. The lowest level of consciousness is what I call ego consciousness. And it's the time when we believe that who we are is our bodies, and what we can do, and what we have, and what other people think of us. We essentially believe we're separate from everyone else, and we're separate from what we would like to attract into our life. We're separate from God. And we go through our lives sort of believing that we are so special and so important, more so than others, and in competition with others. And then there's a level of consciousness that I call group consciousness. And this may be higher than ego consciousness, but it still causes a lot of problems. This is where we begin to identify ourselves in terms of the groups we belong to. I'm an American, you're a Canadian. I am male, you are female. I'm Republican, you are Democrat. I am Muslim, you are Catholic, and on they go. And ultimately, we create an enormous amount of conflicts and ultimately wars over this group identification. But there's a third level of consciousness, is the one that I've always aspired to and try to teach people to go to, and that's called mystical consciousness, or unity consciousness, or even God consciousness. And this consciousness is one in which we begin to see ourselves not as separate from each other, but as connected to each other. And when we see another human being, we see the unfolding of spirit rather than their appearance, what color they are, what shape their eyes may be, what their belief systems or cultures they belong to. That all gets shifted into seeing the connection between all of us. And my friend Ram Dass, many, many years ago, tells a wonderful story that illustrates how difficult it is for some people to understand this level of consciousness. And he tells a story of a shepherd. And the shepherd was tending to his flock. And a person from this ego consciousness from another part of the world approached him. And he said to the shepherd, he said, would you mind if I ask you a few questions about your sheep? And the shepherd said, why, certainly. He said, well, tell me, he said, how far would you say your sheep graze or walk in a given day? And the shepherd said, well, I can't answer that question unless you tell me which ones you're speaking about, the white ones or the black ones. Well, this man said, the white ones. He said, well, the white ones walk 4 miles every single day. We've measured that. He said, that's amazing. And he said, what about the black ones? He said, well, the black ones also walk 4 miles. Well, he was a little perplexed by that, but he said, well, tell me this. He said, tell me, how much food would you say your sheep would eat in a given day? And the shepherd again said, well, I can't answer your question unless you tell me, are you speaking about the white ones or the black ones? He said, well, tell me about the white ones. He said, well, the white ones eat exactly 3.5 pounds of grass every single day. We've measured that. He said, really? He said, well, what about the black ones? And he said, well, they eat 3.5 pounds as well. Well, the man just got a little more frustrated. Finally, he said to him, he said, well, in the springtime, at shearing time, he said, how much wool would you say your sheep give? And the man said, which are you speaking about? He said, well, the white ones. And he said, well, we've measured that. He said, the white ones give 6 pounds of wool every spring at shearing time. And he said, well, what about the black ones? He said, well, the black ones give 6 pounds also. Finally, the man was beside himself. He just couldn't understand this. And he said to him, I don't understand this. Every time I ask you a question about your sheep, you ask me to divide them into the white ones and into the black ones, and then you tell me they're exactly the same. He said, why would you do that? He said, that may be a bit confusing to you. He said, let me explain. He said, you see all of those sheep out there? He said, yeah. He said, you see the white ones? He said, yeah. He said, I see the white ones. He said, well, the white ones are mine. I was given them, I raised them, and they're all mine. I own all of those sheep. Oh, he said, I understand. And he said, what about the black ones? He said, well, I own them too. And that was the story. And it was the story that I've always been amused by. I remember when I called one of my friends, he laughed out loud at that story, Deepak Chopra. He said it got to him. The idea was that we, and from ego consciousness and group consciousness, need to divide everything into colors and into appearances. But there are some of us who understand that those are just artificial divisions and dichotomies. And in fact, everything in the universe is all sharing the same intelligence. We're all one, even though we try so hard to divide them up.
This program is made possible by Hay House, an international publisher helping people transform their lives through books, audios, and gifts that inform, enlighten, and inspire.